Members, we now have a quorum. Let's get started. Welcome to the remote meeting by video conferencing of the panel on economic development. When you speak, please switch on the video function in the Zoom system and show your faces, and your microphone would only be switched on upon my instruction. Please use a virtual background of a specified color in the Zoom system. Simultaneous interpretation service is available. You may choose the simultaneous interpretation function in the bottom right corner to tune in to the appropriate channel. Item number 1, information papers issued since the last meeting. Since the meeting on January the 25th, information papers issued by the Secretariat have been listed on the agenda. Number 2, items for discussion at the next meeting. The next regular meeting of the panel will be held on April the 25th, which is a Monday at 10:45 a.m. The administration proposes the 2 discussion items as below. A, Inland Revenue Amendment, Shipping Commercial Principal Tax Concessions Bill, which is the first item on the list of outstanding items for discussion. B, preparatory work for the full implementation of the new regulatory regime of the travel industry, which is the second item on the list. Do members agree with these discussion items? Does anyone have alternative proposals? If not, we shall proceed to item number 3, Hong Kong Tourism Board Work Plan for 2022 to 23. To allow members to speak in an orderly and fair manner, would our staff members please first clear the raise hand markers for members. Members who intend to speak, please press the raise hand button in the Zoom system and I will invite them to speak in turn. I now welcome representatives from the administration and Hong Kong Tourism Board. I'd like to remind representatives from the HKTB that their submissions at the panel would not enjoy the protections and safeguards under the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance Cap 382. I now invite Mr. Edward Yao, Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, and Mr. Dane Chang, Executive Director of Hong Kong Tourism Board, to walk us through the paper. Good morning, Chairman, members. Together with the Hong Kong Tourism Board, I will brief members on the work plan for 2022 to 23 of the Hong Kong Tourism Board. I believe Mr. Chang would agree with what I'm saying in that it is very difficult to compile this work plan. The challenge lies with how difficult it is to come up with a projection for the travel industry in the next 12 months. No one can see the future, and but we do agree that the travel industry would still face grave challenges. Even though the recent caseload of COVID-19 somewhat eased, it is still premature to come up with any conclusions. So in the coming year, tourism development would still face its challenges. But nonetheless, in the past year, in terms of tourism promotion and support on tourism, our work never stopped. Despite the challenges, we are determined to continue our work on different fronts. Even with the earlier Black Flag violence and COVID-19 pandemic, we never stopped supporting the travel industry. The 7 rounds of support measures amounted more than $3.8 billion. In terms of allowing some practitioners to transition to other industries, results have been achieved. And in the meantime, despite all the challenges, we proceeded with the promotion of tourism, and we were able to take advantage of various opportunities. Hong Kong is well placed to develop new tourism destinations. These destinations could be enjoyed by the public, and they could attract tourists as well going forward. In terms of the Greater Bay Area or mainland markets, multi-destination tourism is a priority. That way, we can complement each other's strengths. Under the National 14th Five-Year Plan, the Tourism Development Plan of the Greater Bay Area, we saw that the integration of culture and tourism is a priority for us. And under the Art and Culture Development Plan of the mainland, shaping tourism with cultural activities and promoting culture through tourism is an important principle. So we are preparing for a restart of the tourism industry. And in the meantime, we have been offering support measures to the industry, and we are hoping to maximize our strengths in terms of tourism. So despite the pandemic, our work would not stop. So over to Mr. Dane Chang, who would talk about the tourism plan as a whole. Mr. Dane Chang. Members, good morning. I'd like to brief you on our work plan for the coming year. Over the past year, we focus on creating positive sentiments, and we have encouraged, well, since inbound tourism stopped and it's not possible to travel, we put an emphasis on stimulating local tourism, and we have adopted new measures and adopted a new approach in organizing events both online and offline. Many of our mega events have been well received locally and abroad, and we have sought to maintain international exposure for Hong Kong while we continue to support the trade. And this goes beyond the tourism industry. We have been working with the catering and retail sectors as well. So I'd like to tell you about our work plan for the coming year. We carried out visitor trend surveys, and we saw that tourists from around the world had some common considerations. First, the safety of destinations, and this includes hygiene or health considerations. As for the entry arrangements, if entry requirements are streamlined, then that would be welcomed by tourists, and the digital experience also counts. We carried out trend surveys, and among the a dozen or so visitor markets for Hong Kong, for mainland tourists, if they are able to travel again, they were asked what their prime destination is. 50% of the mainland visitors wanted to visit Hong Kong for different reasons, such as value for money and good accessibility. In terms of analysis of the travel markets, any restart of tourism would hinge upon the pandemic. We expect the first batch of visitors would be essential visitors, including those who come for family reunion or business travelers. And for tourists, most of them would be short-haul visitors. And the first batch of visitors are likely to visit Hong Kong again. In terms of our opportunities, over the past year, the government rolled out a series of policies, and the central government also covered tourism development. And Hong Kong was touted as an art and culture center, merging the East and West. And like the secretary said, integrating culture and tourism would enrich tourism experiences. And as part of the Greater Bay Area, we can come up with a blueprint for multi-destination tourism. And these represent opportunities for Hong Kong. We have three key strategies. First, stimulating the revival of tourism. We have successfully stimulated the local tourism sentiments, including the holiday at home campaign, and we are preparing for tourism recovery. And with these stories, we can continue to narrate the Hong Kong story to the mainland and elsewhere by introducing our destinations and gourmet. And through the Hong Kong Superfans platform, we are able to maintain proper exposure on the mainland and globally. And we are narrating the Hong Kong stories through third parties. Meanwhile, we will continue to support the industry through the Quality Tourism Services Scheme. And we also managed to roll out a hygiene certification scheme. And based on the reopening of the borders, we will introduce a new tourism brand, and we will also aid the recovery of the cruise industry. In terms of shaping tourism with cultural activities, we have three main strategies. We must step up the integration with the Greater Bay Area. And the SAR government indicated clearly that they would merge tourism and cultural development. And this is in line with the conclusions we drew from our recent surveys, and support will be offered to Hong Kong to develop it into a culture and art exchange center between the East and West. We will continue with our Hong Kong neighborhoods program, which has proved to be successful. A few years ago, we held the Old Town Central campaign, and we extended the program to West Kowloon last year with the West Kowloon Cultural District and our neighborhoods such as Yau Ma Tei and Jordan. We created a new destination for tourists, and where possible, we have held tourism activities and events, including the Staycation Delights program and Spend to Redeem free tours. And in the Greater Bay Area, we have introduced some mega events such as the Hong Kong Cyclothon, and together with Macau and the mainland, we would explore how we can better promote the Greater Bay Area on the mainland and overseas. In terms of mega events, this is one of the strengths of Hong Kong. Every international city would have different mega events. Over the past year, we have held an enhanced version of a Symphony of Lights, and they were the showpiece in the Hong Kong New Year countdown celebrations. We attracted a worldwide audience of over 2.4 billion. This year, where possible, we will continue to host mega events both online and offline. And we will continue with our promotion efforts in multiple mainland efforts in terms of public relations activities. They would be held both on the mainland and overseas.
In terms of our budget, we have $1.75 billion and $100 million that will be from the reserve. Our principle is to spend where we need. If we don't need to spend the money, and if the programs are not effective, we will be refunding the budget to the government. And I'll throw the floor open for questions. We have 12 members who have indicated their intention to speak. Mr. Frankie Yik, and Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, Mr. Andrew Lam, Mr. Chen Pui Lam, and Mr. Wan Chun-set, Mr. Jeffrey Lam, Dr. Wendy Hong, Mr. Yu Pa Leung, Mr. Holden Chow, Mr. Eric Yim, and Ms. Eunice Yong. We have 12 members. I allow 3 minutes for the Q&A. Mr. Frankie Yik first, please. Chairman, thank you. I've got 3 parts to my question. Para 23, the administration said that the HKTB will support the participation of the hygiene certification scheme, and this includes the FAB, the cross-boundary coaches, and all the rest of it. At the beginning of the border reopening, people will be coming on an individual basis, and taxis remain the most important form of transport. Now, for this certification scheme, will this be extended to taxis in order to heighten the anti-pandemic work and to make passengers more confident in taking taxis? Second, since taxis are the main form of transport for the travelers, now when the HKTB launches the quality travel scheme, are you going to be attaching importance to that? Third, the tourism trade has been frozen for 2 years or more. A lot of the coaches have also been suspended. And in order to resume the services, we need to get the coaches ready. Now, my question is, does the administration have any plan to help the sector to make preparation for the border reopening? And third, cruise business. There are 2 cruise liners that they're using Hong Kong as the home port that have already folded. And how are you going to rebuild the cruise industry? What strategies do we have up our sleeves? I defer to the Executive Director for the first 2 questions. Thank you. Right, taxis, we do liaise with the taxis associations. We very much hope that the taxi trade will be part of this hygiene measure certification scheme, that we do have the quality assurance for the certification. It's not going to be too difficult. We hope that this can get off the ground. Now, for the QTS, Quality Tourism Services Campaign, a lot of the attractions are taking part, and many merchants, retail merchants, F&B merchants are also taking part, and also welcome the taxi trade to be part of the QTS scheme. This will enhance the quality of service on the part of the taxi fleet, I'm sure. On the third question raised by Mr. Yik about the cross-boundary coaches, I will liaise with the THB. This is not a matter of tourism, because these covers a whole lot of other aspects as well. We will be deploying the vehicles that are lying idle for the anti-pandemic work, like taxis and coaches, and they are joining in to ferry the people. Mr. Yik referred to subsidies for the cross-boundary coaches. I liaise with the THB, as I said. Now, on the question of the cruise business, now, before the passengers that can come back to Hong Kong, we'll be doing the cruise to nowhere, like we did in the past year. They're not bound for any particular ports. They will be taking passengers out to the sea and come back. Now, when this was launched in July, from July through to September, there are some cruise lines that engage in this. We do have subsidies to encourage this. Where conditions permit, we will certainly do so, but the overriding priority is to tackle the pandemic. In the long run, cruise service is also a part of the multi-destination tourism in the GPA, because cruise travel does have its market, and a lot of cruise lines are very interested in this business. So we will be doing what we said. We will be promoting multi-destination tourism and bringing the cruise business. Mr. Chung-hung. Chairman, thank you. The administration and the tourism board refer to the work plan. They have made flexible arrangement in the light of the pandemic, and they are trying to stimulate the recovery of tourism. So basically, I am in support of the 3 key strategies in the work plan of the HKTB. Leisure travelers and business travelers, we have seen some changes because of the pandemic. I think we should improve the attractions and improve the in-depth tourism, in particular the cultural tourism. In Hong Kong, we do have a lot of heritage. The Clearwater Bay, we have the Dongjiang Brigade, the relics, and at different times, the communist leaderships, the communist leaders have also left their footprints in Hong Kong, and these would facilitate the young people to understand our history more appropriately, and to help them to cultivate their sense of national identity. So are we going to promote the red travel using the heritage sites in Hong Kong in order to cultivate a sense of national identity? I see what the TB has got anything to add later. Now, Mr. Chen referred to the cultural heritage or the relics in Hong Kong as a means to promote tourism. This is very much what we're doing. Now, Mr. Chen probably remember that a couple of years ago, we have revitalized the Sun Yat-sen Trail. These are the places that Dr. Sun Yat-sen had been, and we are linking up all these different points in the Sun Yat-sen Trail. That started about 2 years ago. Now, Mr. Chen has got a point. The history and culture are important because this is not only part of Hong Kong. We can also tie this in with the entire history of the GPA, like a mainland culture. Between Hong Kong and the mainland, we have this historical link. So I think we ought to enhance this particular area. Mr. Chen also mentioned the patriotic education. I understand that in the community there is a plan of putting together a heritage record in Hong Kong, and I think that this is conducive to the development of the historical record in Hong Kong. Like the executive director said a moment ago, we have to tell a story. And if you tell a story, it is historical context. If we can bring out the heritage element in Hong Kong, this is going to be good for Hong Kong. Let's see what the executive director has got anything to add. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I go along with that. In our entire plan this year and next year, or in the coming years, we're going to be attaching importance to arts and culture. We will be telling our historical stories in our Hong Kong neighborhoods program, and we also support some of the festivities, and we are emphasizing this element. $600 million will be set aside for the local tours of the heritage sites. I'm sure that this will enhance people's understanding of the heritage, and we will be liaising with the tourism council when the tourists are coming back to Hong Kong. They will be attaching more importance to in-depth tours. I am talking about the red tour. After the war, there is a lack of this red element there, and I hope that the administration would consider this. Mr. Andrew Lam. Chairman, thank you. I welcome the Tourism Board's work plan. In the paper, it mentions that because of the pandemic, the market has undergone some structural changes. In paragraph 14 of the paper, the administration is aware of the changes of people's travel habit. And also there is mention of all these facilities. I fail to see how these support measures are targeting at these changes in travel patterns. So with these changes in the travel patterns, what support measures are there to assist the trade to help them undergo changes or to transform themselves in a way that they will be able to get adjusted to the new situation post-COVID? Secretary. If I may, Chairman, thank you. We can see that recently there are some changes to the travel pattern. I think the major changes lie in the digitalization. Now, how they understand the destination, how do they plan the itineraries, and when they get to the destination, how did they experience the places? The digitalization is going to be the main point. So in our budget, part of the funding will be devoted to enhancing the digital experience. In our marketing work, we do have the digital platform, which will be taking the lead. In the Greater Bay Area, the culture and tourism development plan, there is emphasis on the smart travel. So when the travelers come to Hong Kong, or before they set foot in Hong Kong, they can do a lot of things on the digital platform. And with this digital platform, the travelers and the trade can be connected. And we do have a lot of micro, small and medium-sized enterprises in the trade. They don't have a lot of resources to invest in this platform, but we can see that the world over, there are many large tourism platforms available, and many of the SMEs are worried that the business might be taken away by these large platforms. So the tourism board will be assisting them in connecting with the incoming inbound tourists. We do pin very high hope on this. We hope in the coming few months, even if Hong Kong cannot reopen the border, we hope that this digital platform will be able to go live, so that when things are back to normal, we can get on with that business.
Next, Mr. Chen Pui-Lang. Thank you. Chairman, I support the HKTV's plan to consider or integrate the developments of the Greater Bay Area in designing high-end tourism products to Hong Kong or the Greater Bay Area, and I do agree with this direction. Before the pandemic, the Hong Kong Tourism Board spent 70% of the promotion budget on overseas promotion, but when we look at the visitor mix, 78% of our visitors are from the mainland, 22% were from overseas markets. And this is certainly owed to the geography of Hong Kong. The government will revoke this flight suspension mechanism and shorten the quarantine period, but we do not see any timetable yet in terms of reopening of the border with the mainland. So my first question is in terms of the use of the marketing or promotion budget. Would the Hong Kong TV have any new plans in the new Culture, Sport and Tourism Bureau? What plans does the Hong Kong TV have, and whether your strategies will be adjusted as a result of the formation of the new bureau? Mr. Chang, thank you very much. In terms of the distribution of resources between the mainland and overseas markets, in recent years, we did observe a change, and the LegCo would always remind us, well, they used to remind us to invest more resources on overseas markets. Once the borders are reopened, our priority will be to appeal to visitors from the mainland or Greater Bay Area. In terms of our marketing plan for the coming year, the focus would be on the mainland market. We will invest at least 100 million Hong Kong dollars, and when the time is right, we would conduct marketing and promotion efforts on the mainland. This is very important since Hong Kong's reputation within the mainland market had changed in recent years. We will retain 50% spending on overseas markets, and it will be spent on appropriate markets. I'd like to stress that our promotion efforts do not have to wait till the borders are reopened. We need to start building a solid foundation in order to maintain the reputation of Hong Kong as a destination. Cities or regions around the world have reopened tourism on a gradual basis. In terms of the new Culture, Sport and Tourism Bureau, from the perspective of the Hong Kong Tourism Board, we very much welcome the proposal. And in terms of our studies and surveys, we saw that culture and sport could complement the development of tourism. So if there's a dedicated bureau, we can have more channels of communication, and we can tell even better Hong Kong stories. And this would also inject energy into our economy. Secretary, would you like to add anything? For the second question, for the new proposed Culture, Sport and Tourism Bureau, my understanding is that there has been general support within LegCo, especially in the fields of culture and sports. And this could create greater synergy. And I believe our work can begin before the new bureau is set up. Last year, we introduced a new initiative by merging West Kowloon Cultural District with the more traditional neighborhoods of Jordan and Yau Ma Tei. They were within the ambit of the Home Affairs Bureau, but there's certainly scope for collaboration. So going forward, there's a lot of work or opportunities between the culture, sport, and tourism fields. Next, Mr. Edmund Wong. Please be concise as you speak. Chairman, I have 3 questions. The HKTV indicated that 50% of the mainland visitors would like to visit Hong Kong when the borders reopen, and the mainland market makes up 78% of our visitors. I'd like to know more about the timetable. The 5th wave of the pandemic would somewhat tarnish the reputation of Hong Kong in the eyes of Hong Kong tourists or mainland tourists. Would more be done in this regard? Myself and the DAB are very much concerned about the livelihood of practitioners, and we have urged the government to create temporary posts for these practitioners. Right now, many practitioners left the industry as a result of COVID. Once the borders reopen, do we have enough practitioners left in the field? Many of them did not even renew their licenses. They dropped out of the industry over the past 2 years. Can the TIC provide relevant figures for culture and sport? They are important to tourism development. I believe hardware is not an issue since much has been invested. For inbound tourist guides and outbound tourist escorts, is there enough support? For tour guides, they are very familiar with Hong Kong. And they need to learn about mainland or GBA culture. Do they have enough knowledge or expertise? For outbound escorts, once they leave Hong Kong, they will not be able to explain things to tourists. In 2019, in the second half of the year, the number of inbound visitors was halved, but mainland visitors still made up the bulk at 78%. In terms of the GBA, they made up more than 60% of our visitors. The market survey we mentioned was carried out in the 4th quarter of last year. We surveyed 13.5 thousand visitors from around the world, and there was an emphasis on the mainland market. 50% of the mainland tourists indicated that they would like to come to Hong Kong. So we see that there's great interest in visiting Hong Kong among the mainland market. In terms of culture and sport development and the training of escorts and guides, we have been working with the Travel Industry Council in this regard. We have signed a memorandum of understanding to offer training support for our guides especially in the fields of sport and culture. We will also be working with the West Kowloon Cultural Authority, and hopefully they can provide support as well. So step by step, we can reinforce the culture and sport know-how among our practitioners. And once the Hong Kong Palace Museum opens, we hope there will be more attention in this regard. We would like to thank the tourism industry for their support towards our anti-epidemic work. Apart from supporting practitioners who could not find work during this time, recently we solicited help from more than 2,000 people at community vaccination centers, and in terms of the distribution of anti-epidemic kits, manning of hotlines, support at community isolation facilities. We invited the trade to fill some 5,000 posts. Their experience receiving guests would prove helpful in our anti-epidemic work. In terms of transport and logistics, some practitioners who used to operate tour coaches rendered assistance in bringing people to quarantine facilities. So the practitioners were able to provide useful support during this time. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Chairman, the pandemic has lasted more than 2 years, and many hotels have taken a hard hit. The Staycation Delights programs of the HATB have proved very popular. So apart from this program, do you have other plans to support hotels? Last time, many people said that they could not connect to the Staycation Delights websites, or that the rooms were all full. So how can the booking experience can enhanced? I also saw that a mainland social media platform called Little Red Book listed a number of Hong Kong attractions where people can find restaurants, etc. So can the contents of the 360 Hong Kong Moments website be enhanced? The Staycation Delights programs proved to be hugely popular. We offered 2 rounds over the past year. We also discussed with the hotel sector how the arrangements can be optimized. So the program is not just about offering 20,000 rooms at discounted prices. It's about creating an interest among staycation experiences locally. We saw that demand exceeded supply. And in light of this, if a visitor wishes to book a room and the quota under the program has been full, hotels would come up with alternative deals or arrangements. And in terms of the issue with the website, you mentioned it has been resolved over the past 2 years. We saw that many people browse our website, and we saw sudden surges, or we face a number of attacks, so we have reinforced security. As for the Little Red Book platform or other social media platforms, very often the content was provided by us. So much of the content was arranged by the Hong Kong Tourism Board.
Chairman, since you've learned the experience, so why don't you change the name instead of calling it Staycation Delights? You should say Guaranteed Delights or something. Dr. Wendy Hong, Chairman, thank you. Over the past few years, I noticed that the TB got extra funding, extra funding of $350 million in 19, in 2020, 700 million. This year, additional funding of 600 billion. I think we need to enhance our exposure internationally. We should devote more resources for marketing. But when it comes to the development of tourism, we rely on the presence of the tourists. It would be hard for us to increase the number of visitors in the near term. Is it right for us to devote provide so much funding? And you have to get the timing right. I know that you have to do the marketing before a product is launched. But if you do it too early, before the products are launched, then it would be amounting to a wasteful use of resources. That the mainland people are more concerned about the pandemic right now. If you devote so much money doing the promotion and marketing, you may not be able to achieve the desired effect. I hope that you will pick the right time for the large-scale marketing in order to enhance the efficiency of the resources. Second, I think this is the right time for us to take stock of the situation. In 2018, we had 65 million people coming to Hong Kong. The business was booming, but the downside was it caused overcrowdedness, and the retail became really homogenized. And it has also given rise to conflicts between Hong Kong and the mainland. And this is also creating a negative impression on Hong Kong, and people's day-to-day lives were also affected. Have we reviewed the causes, the situation? What are the causes of this problem? Is it because of the lack of quality? Are we going to improve the quality? Are we going to limit the number? I hope that you will conduct a review so that the trade and the society at large would get some understanding what we have to avoid in our future development of the tourism trade. When we develop the tourism trade, we should not really disrupt day-to-day life. Perhaps the ED can address this first, and then I take the floor. Thank you. Thanks very much, Dr. Hong. Each year, the government is earmarking funding to the tune of $1 billion. Now, with this $1 billion, that will include all the spending. In terms of marketing, in 1920, starting from that year and over the past year, and in the coming year, the government is earmarking additional funding for marketing. That's because in 2020, we were beset by the black violence, and that was the beginning of the pandemic. And when the pandemic has stabilized, we would be facing tremendous competition in the market. So we have got extra funding, but as I said, we will be using the funding judiciously. Over the past year, we have returned $700 million to the government. In the coming year, or in the year just gone by, we do have quite a bit of reserve that will be given back to the government. We haven't mounted really massive publicity. Now, I think what you're saying is before we see the border reopen, we should not mount a massive publicity, but we have to enhance our exposure even before the border is closed. But we will be acting judiciously. We will be focusing our attention on the local consumption. We will be creating a good vibe in Hong Kong. And this is not consistent with our previous promotional work. I go along with the ED in response to Dr. Hong. When it comes to promotion and publicity, I think it should be done at the time when we can enhance our image and to make Hong Kong one of the most popular cities in the world. In terms of marketing, there are a couple of things here. I think we have to maintain Hong Kong in the center of attention. Despite the pandemic, we cannot allow Hong Kong to disappear from the radar. That's the whole point. There are certain Hong Kong brands and advantages that have to be reestablished. Like, for example, there are certain brands that have been very successful, like the Wine and Dine festival. We may not have tens of thousands of people congregating, but we can break it down like we did last year to maintain this particular brand. And the world trend is all about experience. That before the travelers come back, we should really allow these words of mouth to spread in the social media. I think we should really update this particular aspect. The money spent on the marketing is going to be very important. Dr. Hong asked us whether we will review the situation. Over the past 2 years, we have already started this, and there are 4 major areas in the blueprint for Hong Kong's tourism industry, and all these are still important. Like we should develop diversified portfolio of visitor source markets. We're not simply focusing our attention on the mainland alone, but the Greater Bay Area is an area that we should set great store by. And we have to maintain a cooperation. We should have multi-destination tourism. And to maintain the quality of tourism, we must have new attractions like green tourism, heritage tourism, cultural tourism, and so on. We are fully aware that post-pandemic, the whole travel behavior will be changed. So we will not be putting our focus on the quantity, but rather when the visitors are coming back, I would like to give them really wonderful experience. So we have to upgrade our hospitality, our ability in this area. So in the 2023, we are putting emphasis on shaping tourism with cultural activities. We should have the culture and tourism integration. Now, this is the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong SAR, and we should also let on to this in our promotion. These are the areas that we would like to highlight for this year. Mr. Tan Yuehan. Thank you, Chairman. The government announced that from April, there will be a roadmap laid out over 3 months. And the Rugby 7 will be coming back in November this year. And there will be a high-level financial forum to be held in Hong Kong. And this is going to be a good signal for Hong Kong going forward. Now, in terms of tourism, with regard to the resumption of a normal life within 3 months, now, is the HKTB making preparation for the revitalization tourism post-pandemic. Now, when things are back to normal, will the HKTB be able to tell us what particular strategies they have up their sleeves to inject more confidence in the tourism sector? Right, ED first. Thanks very much, Mr. Tan. We have made preparation on different fronts. In terms of the resumption of business in Hong Kong, I think we have to make preparation for the revival of Hong Kong's consumption. And over the years, we have been liaising with the mainland counterparts about the way forward. And we're doing a lot of publicity and marketing work. If the policies are in place, we are really also making preparation for that. In May or by the end of May, if Hong Kong's life is back to normal, then there will be a mega event and that's the Basel Art event. And there will be a whole series of measures that are in the pipeline in order to recounter the Hong Kong stories to the rest of the world. And the supplement, Chairman, if I may add, and Mr. Tan has got a point there. In fact, the positive numbers have come down, but we are making preparation for life to be back to normal. Now, there are 3 phases. If the trend is going to come down, then the social distancing measures will be gradually relaxed. And that's predicated on bringing the pandemic under control. Failing that, all these will still be pie in the sky. But we have to get on with this. I agree with Mr. Tan. There are certain activities that we're making preparation for. As we indicated in the paper, the first batch of travelers coming back will be the business travelers. If all the MICE activities or the business activities are resuming, this would help. Art Basel is going to be in May, like the ED said. We also have a plan to earmark $1.02 billion for the sector. That this amount of money has not been used up. If the situation permits, then this $1.02 billion from the AEF can be earmarked for the organization of mega international events. Also, a green tourism. We have managed to identify new attractions, and a lot of people are upgrading themselves, and we are earmarking an additional $300 million for this. This would promote the development of green tourism, and the practitioners can transform themselves. Based on the success of green tourism, $600 million have been set aside for tourism to do with art and culture. So basically, when things are back to normal, we would have the programs available to be taken forward. I mentioned the mega events like the Rugby 7, Art Basel, international events. All these will be the attractions, but the whole point is how we can bring the pandemic under control to make sure that there will be safe travel. Board preparation work is underway.
Mr. Yu Park. I remind members that this item should end at 11:50 a.m. So not all members might be able to ask their questions. So please be brief when you speak. Mr. Yu Haolang. Good morning. In terms of the HKTV's work plan for 2022 to 23, I see that it has incorporated many views from the sector, so I agree with the direction. In terms of funding, the HKTV has used its $100 million reserve to stimulate recovery of tourism. Tourism will continue to face great challenges this year. Under the employment support scheme, the government is providing support to the industry, and hopefully the local tourists can restart sooner than later. The HKTV must make proper use of its resources to support the trade and to prepare for the return of travel. We are a tourism destination. This should be our focus, and Hong Kong is also a source of visitors. Hong Kong people love visiting other places, so we need plans for both inbound and outbound tourism. The plan mentioned the need to connect young people with districts, and we should allow our young people or encourage our young people to learn mobile tourism in Hong Kong. So through programs like Spend to Redeem and Staycation Delights, we need to do more with our young people. And in terms of cruise tourism, under the Anti-Epidemic Fund, $20 million have been earmarked, which could be used in future cruise to nowhere itineraries. So how can we encourage cruise operators to come too early in preparation of the restart of cruise tours? Hopefully the authorities can get prepared. Cruise operators have been monitoring our anti-epidemic measures, so hopefully the authorities can talk to the Food and Health Bureau soon to create favorable conditions and encourage cruise operators to return to Hong Kong. The plan also talked about the development of digital platforms. Hopefully the HKTV can reinforce their work on this front so that we can develop artificial intelligence as a part of our tourism. Chairman, what Mr. Yu said was in line with our plan. He talked about cruise to nowhere itineraries. In May last year, these itineraries were introduced. Operators who took on board our recommendations were able to organize these itineraries in a short period of time. Cruise to nowhere itineraries were held in the fourth quarter of last year. The arrangements were satisfactory. Despite a certain number of reinfections among crew members, the arrangements were largely safe and satisfactory. Everyone on board had to be vaccinated. So we hope that these itineraries could resume once the conditions are in place. 5 more members are waiting to speak for the first round. We must proceed to the next item at 12, so please be brief as you speak. Ms. Oden Chow. Thank you. Am I coming through? The HATV has briefed us on their plan. We hope that the measures rolled out in the second half of the year can support the recovery of the trade. Based on the figures provided earlier by the HKTV, that is by the second half of the year, the number of visitors or the number of arrivals in Hong Kong could jump to 9 million. Was the resumption based on the fact that the pandemic would ease in the second half of the year and that international travelers can come to Hong Kong again? Were these the assumptions used? And in terms of key markets, we know that the Southeast Asian markets are very important to us in terms of the number of arrivals and spending. Were these the assumptions or the basis of the forecast by the HKTV? Hong Kong is yet to reopen its borders with the mainland. We hope the authorities can angle for earlier reopening of the borders. Would the HKTV formulate plans in preparation of reopening of the borders with the mainland? Like I said earlier, as mentioned in paragraphs 13 and 17 of the paper, in any forecast, the government or HKTV must use certain assumptions, but like we mentioned in the paper, any forecast is fraught with uncertainties and it could be subject to adjustments. So it's very forecast. But like we said, we must get prepared. Our work cannot wait, and the preparation is needed no matter when the visitors will come back. If we are able to resume travel, then such efforts would not go to waste. Mr. Yim Kong. Thank you. Good morning. I have a few recommendations. Based on the current state of the pandemic, we should not be too optimistic with the recovery of tourism. The Secretary expects 9.6 arrivals in Hong Kong, which could be an overestimation. This year, the focus should still be on those who come for family reunions, business travelers, or local tourists. In terms of support for the travel trade, the HKTV did a lot of promotion campaigns on gourmet in Hong Kong. We can learn from the experience of one of the ambassadors in Beijing. Celebrities and KOLs could be invited to promote Hong Kong gourmet to markets around the world. And while supporting the trade, we must pay attention to the commuting fees and the fees charged by attractions. We must avoid any drastic price hikes. Thank you very much, Ms. Eunice Yong. Thank you. I support the HKTV's plan for the coming year. We talked about opening up of the frontier area at Shuttlecock. I'd like to know whether work is underway, and would tourism at these areas be allowed from the second quarter of this year? In terms of the 25th anniversary celebrations, what are the plans? As announced earlier by the Security Bureau, to support local tours and tourism, the Shuttlecock Pier would be opened up if the area is open for tourism. Eco-tourism at Yanchao Tong and the nearby islands could be boosted, so this is certainly positive news for us. As for the 25th anniversary celebrations of the Hong Kong SAR, the Home Affairs Bureau has planned for a number of celebration activities, but of course, everything would depend on the pandemic. Whether for local celebrations and overseas promotions, plans are already in place, and resources would be allocated accordingly, but much would depend on the state of the pandemic. But the 25th anniversary celebration activities would actually take place throughout the entire year. And like last year, if the pandemic eases, these would be implemented. Mr. Sunny Tan. In general, I agree with the work plan. We have been promoting our districts, our culture. Very often I see very beautiful neighborhoods, but they are surrounded by not very glamorous neighborhoods. So this could be a feeling shared by our tourists. We are consistently promoting new projects and new things. But on the district level, can we work with district councils or other parties to see how we can renovate our districts so that we can remove anything unsightly? I think this is something we can work on ahead of the return of visitors. Apart from enhancing the cityscape, we have collaborated with district parties in many of our projects. For example, one example was Sham Shui Po. In Wan Chai and Central, we promoted local initiatives, and we introduced elements such as local art. In Wan Chai, we beautified a flyover with art installations, and this involved collaboration with district parties. For example, enhancing the walls or putting up murals. These could help promote tourism while incorporating local art. And like Mr. Tan said, we can enhance the cityscape on the district level, and we will continue to incorporate these views. That's all for this item. I'd like to thank representatives from the government and HKTV for attending. We now move on to item number 4, update on Hong Kong Disneyland Resort. To allow members to speak in an orderly and fair manner, could our staff members please first clear the raise hand markers for members? Members who intend to speak, please press the raise hand button in the Zoom system. I will invite them to speak in turn. I first invite the officials and representatives from Hong Kong Disneyland Resort. I remind representatives from the Disneyland Resort that their submissions or views would not be protected under the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance Cap 382. We now invite Mr. Edward Yao, Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, and Mr. Michael Moriarty, Managing Director of Hong Kong Disneyland Resort, to walk us through the paper.
Chairman, thank you. Before the Disneyland speaks, I'd like to say that over the past year, it was a very difficult year for the Hong Kong Disneyland Resort because there was not a single attraction that could earn a decent revenue. But be that as it may, I'm grateful to the Hong Kong Disneyland operators for their efforts in combating the pandemic. When they're closed, they face the operating difficulties, but when they're open, they have done a lot of work, like the anti-pandemic work, the management of the resort, and they're also joining hands with us to carry out a lot of the anti-pandemic work. And we can see that for the large attractions like the Hong Kong Disneyland, they still maintain that the staff complement. And despite the economic downturn and the pandemic, they are helping the economy in that sense. I'm sure that the Hong Kong Disneyland will be briefing you on the situation last year, but we must admit that they are facing a lot of difficulties. I hand you over to Mr. Moriarty. Michael, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, panel members, for your time today. As you know, the impacts of the pandemic have been widespread, and the travel inbound tourism to Hong Kong is essentially zero, and the city's tourism destinations, including our own, have been faced with another year of challenging business and operating environments. In fiscal 21, our theme park did not operate for 40% of the calendar year due to the mandatory closures by the government and business impact brought by the pandemic. And our resort hotels continued to run at adjusted operating levels. Despite these challenges, we have seen improvements in our business performance and our guest satisfaction. To do this over the past year, we've adopted what we call our 3P strategy. Our first P focuses on propelling our business performance by maxing out opportunities that we do have in the absence of inbound tourism. The second P is preserving our workforce, cast wellness, and guest experience while preserving cash. The third P is to prepare for the return of inbound tourism by aiding the recovery and ensuring that we continue to have exciting new offerings for our local guests and inbound tourists. Now I'll go into more detail on these strategies and their effectiveness. In fiscal 21, our targeted products and strategies have led to record high local attendance, more than doubling our prior year figure, led by increases in young adults, also hitting an historic high. In total, our attendance increased to 2.8 million, up 64% to prior year. Our fan base has also grown by leaps and bounds. The Magic Access membership expanded by over 50% for the second year in a row, marking a new record high. Within this, our student Magic Access pass has expanded, resulting in more Hong Kongers enjoying Hong Kong Disneyland than ever before. All these results are impossible without the amazing 5,000 full-time and 1,200 part-time cast members. This is why it has been so important for us to preserve jobs and support our cast's well-being while managing our costs prudently. Same as in fiscal 20, we did not lay off any staff. I cannot stress enough the gratitude I have for our cast dedication and resilience during these challenging times. To ensure our resort can continue to operate in a safe and healthy environment, we established on-site testing and vaccination centers to facilitate the latest testing requirements, and increased vaccinations. At the end of September, we had already achieved a 93% vaccination rate for our full-time cast members, above the city's overall average at that time. And now our full-time cast is nearly 100% vaccinated. With all of those efforts made, our guests continue to give us outstanding ratings. In fiscal 21, 97% of theme park guests surveyed felt that their visits were carefree, and 94% shared that their overall experience was great. In fiscal 21, revenue grew by 19% to 1.7 billion, while we continued to manage our costs prudently. Our cost mitigation efforts resulted in an 8% decrease in costs, despite additional volume, costs incurred on preventative health measures, and of course, no layoffs. This is in addition to the 41% of year-on-year decrease in our costs in the prior year. With revenue up and costs down, in fiscal 21, EBITDA improved by 34% to negative 970 million. We also reduced our net loss to 2.4 billion, which is a 12% improvement compared with the previous year. We have seen that as long as our park stays open, our results are encouraging. Our results in Q1 of this fiscal year is an example of this, when we enjoyed positive EBITDA. Over the past 16 years, the resort has brought approximately 115 billion of value added to the Hong Kong economy, equivalent to 0.29% of Hong Kong's GDP. And we have cumulatively created over 274,000 jobs benefiting Hong Kong's overall economy. And we stay committed to maintaining a pivotal role in the community and in the development of Hong Kong as a top tourist destination in Asia. For the hotel side, after adjusting for the available capacity, the resort's hotel utilization rate was 77% for fiscal 21. What's more, the Hong Kong Disneyland Hotel has been ranked as the most searched hotel in Hong Kong in 21, according to Google. During fiscal 21, we also brought back our exciting and fresh seasonal events, including Pixar's Water Play Street Party, Let's Get Wicked, and our extremely popular A Disney Christmas. Our wide range of tailored merchandise and food and beverage offerings have been a favorite for birthday celebrations, romantic occasions, and guest-inspired co-creation. We have created an online presence for both merchandise and food and beverage and other sales opportunities outside the resort. Our food and beverage team introduced our first ever Royal Food and Drink Fair. Throughout the year, we developed a multiple tailor-made promotions for our guests, including special staycation packages, flash sale hotel promotions, as well as double the fun ticket offers for park visits. We also worked closely with the Hong Kong Tourism Board and participated in the Staycation Delights and Holiday at Home campaigns to feature our promotions. Celebrating our 15th anniversary in the new Castle of Magical Dreams was a key driver of strong local business performance. And Follow Your Dreams, a first of its kind live show in front of the castle, was launched last year, attracting local visitation. The long-awaited all-new nighttime spectacular called Momentous will debut later this year, bringing Disney stories and memorable moments to life against and above the Castle of Magical Dreams, and is sure to amaze our guests. Our resort is committed to contributing to the community with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We want Hong Kong Disneyland to be a place where everyone is welcome to work and to play. And this year, we have had a variety of diversity and inclusion initiatives. Our other community services include a video series produced by our Disney volunteers, especially for young patients at the Hong Kong Children's Hospital. A new meal box donation program was introduced, providing over 12,000 healthily and freshly cooked meals for our local families. With the fifth wave of the pandemic, we are launching all new enhanced community initiatives. Disney is now working with the government partners to expand the Penny's Bay Quarantine Center's uses and capabilities. We are providing free online children playtime workshops, donating food and essential goods to more than 2,000 underrepresented families. And to show our support to the medical staff, we work with the health authorities' proposal to use the Disney Explorers Lodge. While they don't need us at this moment, we stand prepared to offer our accommodation and operate safely for our cast and guests. Finally, I wish to thank the government, LegCo members, and our business and industry partners. With our beloved Disney characters and stories, dedicated cast, an array of new guest offerings, the resort is well positioned to benefit from the future improving market and continue to support our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have 7 members who have raised their hands to speak, 4 minutes for each member. And I hope members will not spend 3 or 4 minutes and leave no time for the administration or the Hong Kong Disneyland. Mr. Chung-hung. Chairman, thank you. First of all, over the past 2 years, the Hong Kong Disneyland experienced tremendous difficulties. Despite the challenges, they maintained the jobs, and they have taken all these anti-pandemic work to maintain the safety of the park. I do give them recognition. There are 3 questions I'd like to raise here. First, the Hong Kong Disneyland will have to be cautious, controlling their budget to tide them over the difficulties. And in the near term, they will have to rely on the local market. Now, given this new normal, my question for the park is, in paragraph 6, there is a mention of opening up local market. Do you have any quantitative numbers for the opening up of the local market? Do you have any planned projected revenue in this regard? In April, there are relaxation of social distancing measures over 3 months. And how will the Disneyland be opening up and relaxing the capacity? I know that Hong Kong Disneyland attaches a lot of importance to social corporate responsibility, and there is mention of the food donation and the joy for the sick children and so on. But in terms of environmental protection, there is not much mention. Do you have any plan regarding the environmental protection? Michael, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As it relates to cost management, we have been focusing on cost management and preserving cash as a top priority. As it relates to this fiscal year, we've not only reduced our cost base further 8% from previous year, on top of the 41% from prior year, but this is extremely top of mind for us. That being said, when we are open, we do well. As I mentioned in Q1 of this fiscal year, we were able to break even. And I'm confident that when we do open up again, that we'll be able to have similar results going forward. The local market has been really the only market that we can go after right now, with the boundaries closed with the mainland and of course inbound travel. But as I mentioned earlier, we have been successful this year with our promotions, as well as our new product offerings, the Castle of Magical Dreams, the special events, and our new stage show, Follow Your Dreams. We also have a record number of Magic Access guests, I think, which speaks to the increasing affinity to Hong Kong Disneyland, and also demonstrates that guests in Hong Kong are voting with their heart and their wallet for how they want to spend their free time while we are all here in Hong Kong. So I think as we look forward to the local guests, I think we have a strong lineup as it relates to our special events, our ticket and hotel promotions, as well as the launch of our new nighttime spectacular, Momentous, which is a multimedia laser water and fireworks show in front of and over the new Castle of Magical Dreams. As it relates to relaxing capacity, we are encouraged by 2 announcements that came out last week. One, that we would be included in the opening in April 21st. And we are excited about that. And we will follow the government's recommendations as it relates to the social distancing relaxation over that time period. As it relates to the environment, I'm cautious of the time here. We do have strong CSR goals, and we are focused right now on the use of sustainable foods, eliminating plastics. Of course, our celebration in recognition of other key milestones such as Earth Day. We also have a concept that within Disney that we call environmentality, where we have goals across the board, and we are very focused on this. And at some other time, we'd look forward to talking to you more about it.
Mr. Michael Tian. Am I coming through? Yes. First of all, I appreciate the efforts of Mr. Moriarty. Disney has been doing a very good job in the past 2 years. Operating costs came down substantially by $2 billion in 19 to 20, and for 20 to 21, revenue went up by $270 million, and the expenditure was further slashed. And in terms of depreciation and amortization, it went up to $1.4 billion last year. When you look at your best year over the past 10 years, revenue was $6 billion. Deducting royalties, management fees, etc., you still suffered a loss of $400 million. Depreciation, etc., would go up coming forward. We invested $5 billion in the new attractions, and the depreciation, amortization or EBITDA will continue to go up. And I don't see how you can cut your losses going forward. The developments will bring benefits to Hong Kong's economy, livelihood, etc. The royalties have been fully pocketed by Disney. It amounted to $400 to $500 million a year. I asked the government to renegotiate the royalties with Disney, whether Disney could only charge half the royalties if losses are suffered. So if they make a profit, they can pocket the full royalties. Would this be feasible? So my question for the government is whether there's any room at all to negotiate such terms. That way, they will not always charge the full royalty fees. Secretary, in the past, Mr. Tian has raised similar questions. The government is in a joint venture with Hong Kong Disneyland Resort in owning and operating Hong Kong Disneyland Resort. And like Mr. Tian said, economic benefits would be created. The contract covers many different areas. Of course, anything could be discussed, but that must be subject to agreement from both parties, as with any commercial contracts. LegCo might be aware that in the past, in face of difficulties, the government engaged in discussions with Disney, and there were variations in the contracts, but they were based on mutual interests. Royalties are rather challenging because for companies like Disney, their IP, such as their characters and stories, are key assets for them. So this requires some discussion between both parties. So if we run into challenges in terms of operation, as shareholders, we would discuss different ways to cut costs. Well, I have a very simple question. If the losses continue, will the government continue to shoulder the losses if Disney continues to stand firm on royalties? The expenditure encompasses more than a single item. There are many ways to increase revenue and lower expenditure. during the very difficult 2021, local revenue hit a new high. Local attendance from by locals hit a new high. So any suggestions that could aid the operation of the park would be helpful. I think we will not stop making losses. So please do something about the royalties. Mr. Andrew Lam. Mr. Tian already asked what I wanted to say. We know that operation has been difficult during the pandemic, but since Disneyland opened, the cumulative losses was almost $5 billion. They basically gave up on phase 2 expansion. I don't quite see the way forward for Disneyland. Is Disneyland considered tourism infrastructure? In other words, are you providing long-term policy backing? I think this is a question to be asked of all theme parks. So in terms of their positioning, future operation, and challenges, what is our overall view? Are you going to carry out a holistic review on policy? Thank you very much. This is a joint venture with the government, and the government provides some land resources and funding. So this is not a pure commercial operation. And like we mentioned in an earlier paper shared with Leshko, while we discussed the economic benefits, the attraction will create direct and indirect tourism and economic benefits for Hong Kong. Like the chief executive said in her policy address, since Disneyland opened, we have reported the economic benefits every year. The cumulative economic benefits exceeded 100 billion Hong Kong dollars. For attractions like Disneyland, they are often the prime destination for overseas visitors, and they would also spend in Hong Kong. In terms of the size of employment, apart from thousands of full-time and part-time staff, we would also assess the number of jobs created every year. The cumulative number of jobs created is 274,000. We hope that they could balance their books. The number of local visitors to Disneyland hit a new high last year. I believe the overall outlook is still positive. Dr. Tanya, thank you very much, Chairman. Beijing has the Universal Studios. Shanghai has another Disneyland. So did Hong Kong Disneyland Resort consider what their unique edge is, given the competition from our neighbors? Under this backdrop, how can Hong Kong Disneyland differentiate itself? What is the strategy? If Hong Kong Disneyland is just the same as Shanghai Disneyland, for visitors from the long river delta like Shanghai, Zhejiang, why would they want to come to Hong Kong Disneyland? And what are the overall benefits brought about by Hong Kong Disneyland to Hong Kong? Well, it is a enterprise. It will consider its own performance. So I'd like to know how Hong Kong Disneyland can stand on its own post-pandemic. Shanghai and Beijing theme parks attracted numerous visitors. Hong Kong Disneyland can not always rely on external support. It must stand on its own. So I'd like to know more about the recovery strategy. Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we look at the time before the social incidents of 2019 and the COVID pandemic, the business was well on its way to recovery and demonstrating its differentiation in the market. Where I'm encouraged right now is what we've seen, not just with our local guests, but with what we've been able to do with the expansion in the area, in Hong Kong, that our inbound guests haven't even had a chance to see yet. So beginning in 2018, we've had the launch of a Moana attraction, Ant-Man and the Wasp, which combined with Iron Man and Tomorrowland is the largest Marvel presence that the company has in Asia. And then to see the new Castle of Magical Dreams, the new daytime show, and of course our nighttime spectacular opening up later this year. All of these items are brand new for any guest crossing the boundary from the mainland or flying inbound from Southeast Asia or elsewhere internationally. So I think we have a lot to offer right now. Not only that, but the question of being able to stand on our own. I think that we, as a resort, have been profitable before, and we will be again when tourism comes back in a stable fashion. As I look to where we are with respect to the GBA, that is a huge opportunity. And we haven't even been able to exploit the government's investment in infrastructure yet, such as the high-speed rail, the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, the new boundary crossings and the tunnels in access to Lantau that make it even more accessible to tourists from the mainland. And then, of course, following that, we have the third runway, increasing the lift into Hong Kong from Southeast Asia and other fly-in markets, which we're very excited about that. I think finally, you mentioned, Shanghai Disneyland. The two parks or two resorts are definitely differentiated. And Hong Kong is certainly its own market, and Shanghai is its own market with its own areas where it will look for guests. And so I think, if anything, the brand of a Disney vacation experience or a Disney resort has been enhanced over the past few years, and we look forward to welcoming guests from across the boundary and inbound.
Dr. Wendy Hong, thank you. In terms of the question about royalties, well, that was covered by Mr. Tian. Now I'd like to talk about management fees. Last year, Disneyland did not have to pay management costs to the Walt Disney Company. This year, would the management fees continue to be exempted? That's my first question. Disneyland has closed for almost 3 months. And as the government announced that arrangements would resume gradually, does Disneyland have a resumption roadmap or timetable? Initially, how many visitors will be welcome? Thank you. Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last year, as you guys know, the royalty and management fees are variable in nature, and they're all performance-based. And so the management fees last year with negative EBITDA were 0 in fiscal 21. And so, yeah, there were 0 management fees in last year's performance. As it relates to, our ability to move forward, being closed, as I mentioned earlier, we do well when we're open. And so as we look at how our business is going when it's closed, it's obviously not as good. But with the $2.1 billion revolver that the Walt Disney Company has provided, we've certainly been able to weather these tough times. In addition, this year, the shareholders agreed to defer the FY22 royalty fees to further help Hong Kong Disneyland's cash position during these challenging times. And that's a deferral for FY22's royalty fees. As it relates to the timetable for us to reopen, we're eager and currently anticipating to open on April 21st, as per the previous advice that we've received from the government. Of course, we need to remain agile for any changes in that plan. And we'll pay close attention to the protocols set forth in the phased approach to open up safely.
Right, if I may add, Chairman, the second question is not a decision of the company itself. Now, over 3 months' time, we'd like to resume travel. Now, we're doing this by phases. Now, for the first phase, theme parks like the Disneyland, we will have particular requirement, like 50% for the first phase, 75% for the second phase, and so on. Last year, the Disneyland, they have done a lot of extra work, and they have the system. They are doing a better job than other operators. They will make sure that when they reopen, in terms of hygiene and anti-pandemic work and the staff safety, patron safety, they are doing a pretty good job, and that will make people more confident. That's why last year they hit a new high in terms of local visitation. I have 3 more members. Unless members object, I would extend the meeting by 15 minutes. I may not necessarily use up the all the time extended. No objection, right? I will extend the meeting by 15 minutes. Mr. Perry Yu, I'm going to draw a line there. And then Mr. Eric Yim, and then Dr. Stephen Wong, I draw a line there. Mr. Perry Yu, Chairman, members have put a lot of questions that I'd like to put. And I'd like to put this question for the Secretary. In early January, the theme parks have been closed. Now, under the employment support scheme, I feel surprised that these theme parks are also adversely affected, but they're not included in the ESS at all. So will the government consider incorporating the theme parks into the employment support scheme? Second, in the trade, people would like the Disneyland to upgrade their products to improve the patrons' experience, and also to make the theme park more attractive. Between the government and the Disneyland, have you considered achieving some synergy in order to attract the GBA visitors to Hong Kong? Now, the Sky City or the Ongping 360, I think that they should be able to come together and achieve some synergy effect. I thank you. In terms of the ESS, Mr. Yu said that in the latest round, we haven't included the theme park. Now we'd like to have more people benefited from these as much as possible. But we are focusing our attention on the SMEs, particularly those enterprises that are not particularly viable. So we have excluded the large corporations. We have excluded the businesses that are not really hard hit. And for companies that have government investment, we have excluded them because they would like to devote the resources to areas where they're most needed. So other than the Disneyland, the Ocean Park have been included because we have the government involvement. We have excluded them from the list. Obviously, when we launched the scheme, we like to focus our attention on the SMEs. Mr. Yu, second question, we have been doing this all along. I know that the Disneyland does have a lot of cooperative or collaborative plans with the trade. That these theme parks are attractions, but people will not just spend time on the theme parks. And so, as I said, they have to benefit the entire of Hong Kong, and this is something that we've been doing. Now we discussed the Hong Kong Tourism Board a moment ago, and all these attractions are cooperating with one another in order to achieve a synergistical effect. I agree with Mr. Yu. Mr. Eric Yim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Hong Kong Disneyland absolutely believes that it needs to be a part of the community that we live and work in. And through our Disney Volunteers program and many other charitable efforts, we have done that, especially during the pandemic. As it relates to the tickets, for locals, we've been engaged with in many NGOs over the past few years. And in fact, last year, on average, we give away about 100,000 complimentary tickets to needy Hong Kongers, specifically children, those who are physically or differently abled, and of course, seniors as well. And so we are very engaged on this front and look for your advice on how we can help the community more in this regard. As it relates to the community support that we have right now, I mentioned earlier that we're doing online Disney Volunteers storytelling. We're providing freshly cooked meals for the underrepresented groups, as well as helping ethnic minorities here in Hong Kong. But I would like to pause right now as it relates to one of our other focuses for the community. It really has been our cast and helping them through this pandemic with respect to not just their health and safety, with nearly 100% of our cast vaccinated, but also sharing information that is spread to the health and safety of their families. When we poll our cast, we often find that the information that we've shared has often influenced their entire family, young and old, to become vaccinated. And so we do believe that we're a part of the community and we need to give in this respect, and look forward to any advice that you might have for us in the future.
Last speaker, Dr. Stephen Wong. Chairman, thank you. Secretary, we mentioned the royalty, and we had some discussion on the IP. I've got some macro question for you, Mr. Secretary. The Create Hong Kong, or the IP aspect fall within your portfolio, Mr. Secretary. in terms of the social benefits, whether the Disneyland can bring about employment, in terms of creative industry, in terms of IP, and also the training provided by the Disneyland, and also the impact on the SMEs and the startups. Now we have to promote the development of IP in Hong Kong. How can the Disneyland promote the overall social benefits in this regard? Secretary, thanks very much, Dr. Wong. For economic benefits, we all understand that. When it comes to the creative industry, perhaps Michael can say a little bit more here. I think about 2 or 3 years ago, when we discussed with the Disneyland, I knew that they have this creative center. They have the Imagineering Center in Hong Kong. I heard that this is an Asian center outside the US. I've taken part in some of these activities. They have provided the young people in Hong Kong an opportunity to take part. This is an incentive program, and the award would enable people to work in the company. In Hong Kong, we do have the attractiveness. In Hong Kong, we do have a lot of young people who are interested in these professions, and they lack opportunities in big corporations. So if they have training in these corporations, it would certainly help. And the other one is the promotion in the community. I haven't really revisited the subject over the past years, but is this still going on, Michael?
Yes, Mr. Secretary. I believe you're referring to the Imagination competition, which we've been hosting for 10 years consecutively now. And it has been an extremely popular program. And the beauty of it is that we've actually seen participants in this program come to be Imagineers here at Walt Disney Imagineering and at Hong Kong Disneyland. I think it further inspires not just creativity, but also an interest in technical fields, including engineering here in town, which is inspiring. But it's not just there about creativity. You know, just this past year, we've had certainly some downtime with the COVID, and we've had over 124,000 training hours where we're trying to continue to invest in our cast, not just in creative endeavors, but personal wellness, fiscal intelligence, etc., trying to lift everyone up.
Thank you very much. So much for the Q&A session. Thank you very much, government officials and the Hong Kong Disneyland for being with us. There is a bit of housekeeping. This item number 5, AOB, any other business? Any AOB item you'd like to bring up? If not, meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all very much. Thank you.